Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of Mask and Mimicry Tabletop Role Playing Podcast. As usual, I have Brand with me,
Yes.
and today we're going to talk about developing characters during downtime. Developing during downtime.
It's not playtime.
Fun bit
The in
of
between.
alliteration. Yeah, the specifically in this case, we're referring to downtime in character. As well as possibly downtime out of character, between sessions. And it's certainly something you'll be doing between sessions a lot of the time. But, when you're have breaks in the story, you have a period of time for your character to do things other than just pick up the latest plot hook and chase it down and go
Yeah.
kill the baddies or whatever the case may be. What are you doing outside of that? How often do you get opportunities like that? And how do those fit into your usual tabletop games and everything? So, I wanted to start with kind of the most basic question. Again, as always, for everyone watching as well as for Brand, do you like having downtime? What's good about it? What's bad about it?
I do. I might be losing you here.
Losing me?
Connection wise.
Don't do that. Not a fan of that at all.
Looks good now. I do like having it. I think it's needed to some extent, whether it's liked or not. Oftentimes that downtime represents for in-game elements a player's ability to upgrade themselves over time. The small moments where you can buy new gear to spend the money you got from rewards, etc., etc., and you kind of need that to kind of follow that RPG progression a little bit. Not always the case, but it plays a role in that aspect, I think. And it can sometimes just be really fun, whether it's in character or in game or out of game and in between sessions. Maybe you're just getting one-on-one with one of your players and doing written form RP. That's really fun too, and it's actually kind of a nice break, I think, to go from having to worry about like 3 or 4 players and managing the limited amount of time they each get in a 3 or 4 hour window to having that one-on-one, continual routine to just focus on. I think that's nice.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I'm looking. Our stream is kind of unstable at the moment. The bit rate has dropped to nothing, but it is playing. So hopefully that means Twitch isn't going to crap on us. Yeah, I feel very much the same. I love having downtime. I actually think that is. I mean, you certainly don't want a game of nothing but downtime, but I think it's really nice to have a good mix of downtime in
Mm-hmm.
tabletop games for a variety of different reasons. But I think it's a really great chance to develop things off screen, as it were, where you're not live before people. You can explore things and not rush gameplay, because
Yeah.
there's always when you're playing live with people, normally that it's like there's anytime I'm doing something that's very personal to my character or specific to just my character, or even just going and doing chores, I'm going shopping and stuff. I'm actively weighing in my mind how much of the game's playtime I'm using doing that
Mm-hmm.
because I don't
Me
want
too.
to burn up too much of
Yeah.
everyone else's time.
And unless you're sitting there like forcing the conversation, like, "Hey, I'm going shopping. Do you want to come with me?" Just to include them in that moment, like you risk, and it happens frequently.
Yeah.
Regardless, you risk splitting the party in 1 or even 2 or 3 different directions just to handle their personal endeavors.
Yeah, and I mean, dealing with some of that in during a game is a bit of a our bit rates went back up. Nice.
We love that.
Is it's up to excellent now. Good job, Twitch. Um, but dealing with that during live play is a bit of a different topic, and there's a number of different things you can do. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things I've tried to do with my Eberron setting currently is I introduce vending machines. because there's so much common low magic tech in Eberron that I was like, common goods in big cities can be acquired through essentially vending machines. And you walk up and you just go, I want rations. Okay, there's a machine that has a standard cost for it. Go have fun. So we
I need
don't
to
have to
tell
go.
B2.
We just don't have to always role play out the mundane. I'm buying
Yeah.
groceries or whatever. There's sometimes we want to role play that out, and that's cool. Um, but that's kind of a little bit of a different topic, I guess. Um, I actually think that personally we should build downtime in a bit more frequently than we do for most games. Like, thinking about this topic's gotten me thinking about ways that I can perhaps build more downtime into my game on a regular basis. Like, is there a
Hmm.
way that I can build some kind of downtime in, uh, even after sessions in the middle of a mission or something? Like, is there a way I can do that so that people have some kind of an opportunity to do things downtime wise, so that people don't feel like they always have to do this in the middle of a session, or how can I prompt people and build some of those in, add more padding in between quests. You finished a quest, so you don't feel like you have to necessarily run immediately off and do another thing, but you
Yeah.
can have a couple of days there, um, without it soaking up time. And I don't know, I haven't thought up exactly how to do that yet. I think part of it's maybe just establishing that expectation that the players can ask for downtime. Like, maybe having just this general expectation of saying, okay, you know, once you finish doing a quest or something, you can, one, in between the sessions, you can come to me and say, like, I want to do this during the downtime or whatever, and do that. Or we can even possibly retroactively do it. Like, even if the players have moved on, maybe you can come to me and say, well, like, that night I wanted to do something, but I didn't want to eat up a ton of playtime with it.
Hmm.
So can we do something separately
Yeah.
and deal and kind of go back and deal with that? Not a huge amount, but like if it's just the night before or something, be like, yeah, maybe, yeah, sure. It depends on what it is. Um,
Yeah. I think a lot of us hear the word downtime and we associate certain activities to it. So if you end a session, let's say, or whatever, in the midst of travel, like you're going from point A to point B,
mm-hmm.
maybe actively like encouraging, like, if there are conversations you guys want to have, this is a great time to have them. Whether you want to do one-on-one RP or post it in a group chat so everyone can see. Maybe everyone's around the campfire. Blah blah blah. You can have those in those moments. That does kind of require everyone to maybe participate if everyone is to be involved, but you can still get one-on-one with someone if you want to.
Yeah, and I think it is a complicated thing to balance at times because there's some of that I want to be during live play. Like if people are traveling and they're having a private conversation between two of the player characters, um, around a campfire or something, that can be compelling and interesting for other people to be kind of privy to out of character or
Hmm.
whatever, and see going on. So it's not, I definitely think it has to be something that you balance to a certain degree, because I don't think you want to extract that from the game as much as keeping people from. And I guess maybe this is where my line of where it can more easily be focused in on keeping downtime for solo activities for the most part. If you're going to do something completely by yourself that doesn't really involve other people, downtime's a real good time to pursue that individual goal or whatever.
Yeah. Unless there's a time frame where things are happening in character in game where you kind of only have the opportunity that one
Yeah,
time. Like maybe you're passing through town, you're going to spend an hour there, and you're back on the road. You kind of have to do what you're going to do if you're going to do it. um
yeah.
but otherwise, yeah, doing it solo stuff on the downtime would be great.
And I wouldn't want to discourage people from doing solo stuff during gameplay. as much as encouraging them that downtime is an option for doing it. Because there is some of that where someone introduces it or something, and you can get some good emergent role play and stuff from it. Like someone decides, I'm going to sneak off and go do this thing on my own. If they do it on downtime, no one else knows about it or gets to
Mm-hmm.
react to it. If they do it during live play, somebody else might be like, well, what the hell are they doing? I'm going to follow them and sneak around and follow after them and stuff. So there's definitely a lot of that you want to do. I think the easiest distinction for downtime that comes up is certainly when it's established, when the DM says, we're going to have 3 days of nothing.
Yeah.
And what do you want to do? And kind of speaking about the what's good about it and what's bad about it. My current game, we've had very little downtime in so far. In fact, we've had one period of downtime that we just had for like
Yeah.
2 days in game
Like an
wise.
actual established, this is a downtime
Yeah.
phase of
Yeah,
things.
you are now open to go do some things you want to do, kind of thing. And I wanted to ask you, as one of the players in that game, are there any challenges that you feel this has caused or issues within the game itself?
Having the moment to do those things or doing those things.
Not having any more
Oh,
downtime, like because we haven't had any opportunities for downtime at all, really.
no. Honestly, our situation's different. There's a lot of travel involved, and there's a lot of, with the players we have, skirting on purpose, civilization, which makes it more accepting.
We're
Like,
avoiding
we're
that
not just,
encounter.
yeah, we're not just running from town to town to town and always around people. We're purposefully trying not to when we can. And now we're at a town finally with some quests and goals, and it makes sense where it's at now that we have that moment and
We've
haven't
had
had
a
it as much.
little bit of the walk to Mordor, just forever
Yeah,
travel.
yeah, basically.
I can say at least one problem that I've seen it in the game for me, and that is rapid level progression. Your characters have traveled from like level 1 to God, what level are they now? 6,
Five, I
5,
think. I think
5.
five.
From like level 1 to
Yeah,
5. Now, playtime wise, it's been months.
yeah.
It's been like 6 months or something. Um,
It's been more than that.
but in game wise, in character wise, it's
Two,
been 2 months.
maybe two.
It's been like 2 months that they've gone from level 1 to 5, which isn't insane or terrible. Uh, and I actually wanted this game to have a slightly faster level progression. So I'm kind of trying to actively keep that progressing a little bit quickly. But it is a little bit of a like, wow, their power levels have increased starkly in 2 whole months. Um,
Yeah.
because
Same
there's no
same
downtime.
as
There's
for
no
my campaign,
a
which is
little
now
bit, yeah.
over an actual year real time play. It's been 3 months now,
Yeah. And that's
basically.
where I do think some of that downtime stuff would help to flesh that out and make more sense. And it's kind of on us as the storytellers to organize that in a way so that we're not constantly pushing people into the next quest unless we want that level of quick progression, which
Yeah.
I do, but I'm also like kind of getting to the point in my story where I'm like, it's a bit much. Like it's just been a couple months and y'all are like, the power.
Yeah. And part of that is just kind of tied to how DMs make their story. If the story is very compelling for a character to drive forward, to want to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you kind of have to let them keep going. And it doesn't make sense. We're like, oh, well, you have 2 weeks to just goof around when the character doesn't want to do any of that, wants to, let's go. We've got things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the differences in there between your game and my game. They've both had a fair amount of travel, but I think mine has helped mitigate the rapid level progression a little bit to catch up to yours
Yeah.
because so much travel time. Just y'all go travel somewhere, and I'm like, well, you just shaved off 5 days. I could
Yeah.
just cross it off. Whereas with yours, we have ready access to ships and stuff a little bit more,
Yeah.
and so we can get to
Portals,
some
magic.
places quicker. Um, and so it's a little harder for you to just bleed off time and go like, oh, there, 10 days passed.
Yeah. Soon.
And I actually cut some of the encounters and stuff out of some of the travel because I was like, all right, we're traveling forever. We're forever on the road. Let's progress this a little.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna throw random encounters at them because I want them to move on. Let's progress this a bit so that we can get to some downtime.
Absolutely. I think downtime, whether it's in character or while you're playing the game or even outside behind the scenes, is good for establishing the world around you. You're meeting NPCs. Typically, you're talking with townsfolk, and it
Mm-hmm.
starts really painting that it's not just your group that you're dealing with and the NPCs that you hand tailor to that we meet. You're
Yeah.
starting to see more and more of actual places and having time to experience different things, and you can build minor stories into those elements that you wouldn't have been able to do maybe.
Yeah, especially depending on how it's used, and that is something I wanted to get into next. Actually, is let's
Ah,
talk about because both of our games are currently in a period of downtime,
yeah, they are.
um, and I think that downtime can be used for a lot of different things, but it can also make good use of. It can also be used introspectively to kind of take a pause to think about your character and reflect on because when you go into a downtime period, your storyteller is usually asking like, "What do you want to do
Right.
yourself?" Irrelevant, usually separate from everybody else. What do you want to do? And you have to stop and go, oh, "What do I want to do?" I'm not being thrown a plot hook right in my face to give me something to do. I have to think of
What
something to
are
do.
your personal goals? Yeah. What are
Yeah.
your hobbies,
So
basically? Do you have hobbies? It's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, so with our current downtime in our games, I'd like to talk about that and just how it's being used. Like, how you
Yeah.
see people taking advantage of that time, how you would like people to take advantage of that time.
It's there's a spectrum, and everyone is on a different part of it. Um, some people are very proactive and I have a list ready for this. Like I've been waiting. You, um,
4 paragraph email.
yeah. Some people are like, I honestly have no idea where my character is going from this point. Like, can you help me? And I get to that point, and we just leveled in mine, so it kind of also made sense for me to ask some people like, hey, you just leveled. Are there any new goals that you have going forward, given the situation, the things that have happened, um, how things might be changing potentially? And I ask those questions when they seem to be struggling, and then work with them in hand. And some of us are very more RP driven, where we actually have RP conversations via email or whatever chat. And some
Mhm.
are just, here's a write up. We don't need to go into it, whatever works, and make some rolls, do some things, and it's good.
Yeah, I think for me, like as a storyteller, the thing I mainly want is for someone to have things they want to do during downtime. Like
It's
there,
great.
it really it's really kind of frustrating at times when you're like, all right, we're going to have downtime. You're going to have 3 days. What do you want to do? And you get nothing back. It's like, you don't want to do anything. Your character's just going to drink, I guess, for three. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I
Yeah.
guess. Sure. Because when they have things they want to do, it's like, okay, you're invested in doing stuff. You want to progress. You want to do things in the game. That's awesome. We can follow up with that. Um, and so like And there's definitely a lot of different types of things you can do during downtime. For instance, in your game, I as we said, I immediately sent you after our last session like a 4 paragraph email of things I wanted to do. In part because there's my character has a lot going on, and the next part of the story we're going into is really kind of getting into my character's backstory and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's
It's building
obviously
there.
a little bit more invested in the next couple of days than some people. But my activities ranged from social progression, like character
Mhm.
progression and skills. I was like, okay, I want to work on learning more. He's not accustomed to this particular place we're at, and he really does not like being embarrassed by things. So he wants to learn more about their social etiquette, their customs, local dance. How does that stuff work? What should he know if he were a native of the area and stuff? He wants to research that. Um, he wants to he's been working on learning dwarvish, and he can't speak it, so he's like, I want to learn better, practice, kind of get that set up so I can practice learning dwarvish. um, Also tying up loose ends and plot hooks. He had
Hmm.
that one side quest that he was supposed to do, and he had every intention of doing, but he never really got an occasion where
Yeah.
I felt like he could really pursue it. So he was finally like, "Look, I'm not gonna be able to do this. I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen. I'm busy." And so just tying that up, being like, "Okay, I'm gonna go talk to that NPC, and we're gonna wrap this thing up because I got stuff to do."
Yeah.
Um,
On that, at least, you came at it in an angle where you still provided a thing and
yeah,
still got something for it, with the potential of, on my end, being like, okay, well, there were efforts made. You're making that effort to say, hey, this isn't a thing, but the thing you gave them might be useful for something else later. It's like start a build, maybe a new thread somewhere.
yeah, yeah, because he didn't want to, he didn't want to just be like, "To hell with you, I'm done with you." But he was like, "I'm about to get on a boat for like several weeks. Your thing's not happening. I'm out of here." Um, and of course, since he's a wizard, spell learning, so much spell learning.
All of it.
Uh, During those 3 days, it was more preparing to scribe spells,
Yeah.
since they're about to get on a ship. But I've got it listed out, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna be like that whole boat ride. He's just gonna be in his room, door locked, face in book, scribing things, um, no breaks. And so, that's kind of what I was doing for downtime, going in and thinking, okay, how does my character want to improve himself, both magically and in like social and culturally with this
Yeah.
place? How does he want to kind of establish himself better? That's kind of his maybe a possible goal in the future. So how does he want to kind of ramp up and prepare for some of that? Um, then also tying up some just random loose things that have been lingering, and social interactions with NPCs he wanted to talk to.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard. It's not hard. Doing downtime RP when you're doing social, you can either try to like gloss over, this is the gist of the type of conversation you might have with this
Mm-hmm.
person you want to talk to. But if you really get into it and actually have those conversations, they eat up a lot of time. Um, I think like between you and Sarah, it was like the whole half a week of this week so far. Nailing those things down. So if you have time, do it. It's fun. If you don't have time, maybe try to just loose end it. Like, generally, this is kind of the result of a conversation. If a conversation happened,
Yeah.
make some rolls, maybe. I don't know, but
And I think largely there's a couple different methods for going through downtime RP, and resolving downtime stuff. There's one just out of character talk and summing things up.
yeah,
Just even if they're engaging with an NPC, being like, okay, what do you want out of it? Okay, maybe make a roll for me or something, and here's the summary of what you get or how that goes down. And I think
yeah,
that especially works for any kind of transactions, um, any kind of uh, crafting activities or whatever. If they're trying to craft something, if they're trying to talk to someone and buy something, or maybe just convince somebody, of something. But if they're going with like an actual important NPC or something, you can still do that. And sometimes you need to, because you just don't have time to,
right,
especially if it's like, if you're actually having sessions. Like we weren't having sessions, so we were kind of in between a little bit because of holidays and stuff. But especially if you're having a session one week and then the next week and you're just having some downtime in between, you can't necessarily assume someone's going to have time to
yeah.
just do the thing.
To
But if
email
you,
all day, yeah,
yeah, but if you do have the opportunity, then you can either, you can email do basically play by post to get through the conversation, and you can still gloss over some things there. Like we did that, and at a certain point I was like, okay, I'm taking up a lot of your time and we're talking about tea now, so maybe if you
Yeah,
want to end here, we're done. Well, I'm fine with that.
we're good. Yep.
Or even meet up and do like a one-on-one session for like an hour or something, which is of course
Right.
the most onerous way to do it,
We've done
but
it.
is
No.
sometimes nice to be able to do depending on what someone wants to do.
Yeah. The downtime is all encompassing. You can do so much in it in such a short amount of off time. But if you really want those detail elements, like if you're talking to an NPC whom you expect you'll probably engaging with several times throughout the campaign's duration, you miss those details and you miss that character
Yeah.
interaction. And that's just the downside of it. But you get a lot more done in one sitting, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more that comes out of it. Like, we had the kind of play by post we were doing, and I think if we had wrapped that up with like just a summary at the beginning to say this is kind of what I want to tell this person, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I want. Yeah, we could do that, but I think it would have ended very differently. I think it would have ended much more well, like here's what I know, if that helps you any, but I don't know, and that's probably about it.
Yeah.
um, it wouldn't have turned into something that might be a more recurring, drawn
You
out
wouldn't be
thing.
making sending message probably every night on a boat talking about crystals.
Nobody's gonna know what he's doing in there. Shh, nobody. What's
Who's he
Rohan
talking
doing in
to?
that room by himself?
He's been doing an awful lot of talking to himself.
So much. Um, but yeah, so it's definitely something you have to balance with time. And it's something that, like, for my game, I want to think, like I mentioned earlier, of ways to build in more downtime during the game, but especially like having the players be able to ask for downtime.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of downtime where we're having normal sessions every week, and somebody might be like, I want to do this thing in downtime or whatever, is probably more likely to either be resolved with an email or a summary,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
it'd be like, unless I just happen to have time, I'm not going to want, and it depends on how frequently it's happening, but I'm not going to necessarily want to be like, yeah, let's get together one-on-one to resolve your selling of the trinket or whatever.
Yeah. And some players probably take advantage of it when it's given to them, in game especially.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because they think they should, for some, like there's an important reason to do so. Like it's part of the planned game time. It's like, well, we're here for a reason. We got to do something. So this is a crumb. I know it. Let's go do it. So they do it, and they take advantage of every opportunity to go out. And you want to be careful not to allow the party to split too frequently like that.
Yeah. You don't want
Um,
too many shopping episodes.
yeah. If the same player is constantly trying to follow a breadcrumb that may or may not exist every session and taking up, a good portion of time every session, too much downtime maybe.
Yeah. But you also, I think, you don't want to discourage people from doing some solo activities, or necessarily discourage them from doing things like shopping. Like
Yeah.
I try to minimize it, but I never want to completely eliminate it from the game. I don't want people to feel like they can't go and do that during normal game time, especially if they're not just buying rations or something.
Right.
Or as something that comes up pretty frequently in our game, but certainly doesn't come up in everyone's game, going to buy food for the night. I'll
Yeah.
have restaurants and things planned out, so people go in there. I'm like, oh yeah, so you're going to the Toll the Bread taco stand, sure.
Yeah.
There's one around every corner, and so I think I do get concerned sometimes or at least over the idea of discouraging people from doing those things, because I don't want people to feel like they just constantly have to chase plot hooks. And I know that can be a thing that as a player you feel sometimes, like the DM presents a thing and you're like, oh, I should do that. And as a DM, I'm like, yeah, I did present a thing. I do kind of want you to do it. But there is a line where I'm like, okay, if your character really doesn't want to do it, I don't want you to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want you to
And
follow
we've
it
done
just
that
because
too.
you feel compelled to.
We have a player in your campaign who loves to not do the things.
But as he says frequently, he's like, I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna do whatever y'all want to do.
Yeah.
Because he's like, okay, my character doesn't want to do this, but as a player, I don't want to do it. So
Yeah. And downtime can serve as individual character growth, whether it's a small thing or even their backstory coming into play. We've had instances in yours where one of your players got a strange letter affixed to his door and went off in the middle of the night and only told one other person. And it took a while to deal with because combat got involved, but we were there watching. There was an opportunity for other players to see it, and we failed those opportunities. Myself, that
yeah,
would be me. But there were opportunities for other people to get involved with that, but it just turned into a small side thing. But it opens up conversation after that with those two characters, and then possibly the other characters once that conversation starts building and building, and that information comes to light to us. We get involved later, and that's okay.
yeah, because I definitely think that solo activities or splitting the group up or whatever activities are definitely different than downtime. Because downtime for me is kind of inherently asocial with the other players for the most part. It can include players with the other players and stuff, but at least it's doesn't usually involve the whole group, or potentially involve the whole group. But it is a balancing act there, like having solo or small group activities, because you don't want to very often pull one person aside and have everyone else wait for an hour and a half while they resolve combat. And that's, I believe, the only time that's happened in my game so far.
I think so.
It, but I don't. It's also something that you shouldn't try to never have as much as try to minimize and not do too
Yeah.
much, because like in that case it was backstory related. It was something
Yeah.
very specific to this character. It certainly was not something we could have done or I would have wanted to do in downtime where no one else would know about it. I'm like, no, I want them to know that he is about to get ganked in the alleyway and they're all sleeping and he's currently getting knifed by these assassins.
Yeah.
I want them
I've
to
done
know
the
that.
same for my campaign with one of our characters, and that was his choice, not mine. Provided
Yeah.
the reasoning for him to do a thing, and he chose to tell no one, and almost died for it. And we got to that point. It was like the last 30 minutes of the session or something. It's not downtime necessarily. Everyone's going to sleep, but he did a thing, and I finished the session with that and told him a lot's about to happen. You and I need to meet this week at some point and have an hour to 3 hour session by ourselves and figure out what's going on with this. And so we're not wasting everyone else's time in any of that.
Yeah, and it definitely, there's definitely not a good rule of thumb because it definitely varies on the situation. Like with the one that I presented, that I did in my game, if that had been right at the end of the session instead of like the middle of it, if that had been on the tail end of the session, and he was like, "I'm gonna go off by myself after these people or whatever," I, I might have done the same. I might have been like, "Well, can you and I meet up and and resolve this?" Or maybe at least write up some of it to skip ahead to what's going to go on and things, so that it doesn't take up so much time. I also will admit I didn't expect it to go on into a full-on fight. So it was also something where I was like,
Yeah.
this will be relatively swift. We're gonna resolve this, and I was like, okay, this is not ending this quickly. I will say that whole thing went nothing like I expected, because I originally expected him to be completely alone. And
That's fair.
him not being alone was good for him, but it did drag it out much longer. Because I had expected that to actually be the opposite, where he was going to have a short scene on his own, and then everyone else was going to have a combat. Because
Mm.
if you remember in that case, he basically went to go meet up with someone who he received a letter from, and went to go meet up with them, and they were like kind of blackmailing him. And then he was like, "Well, I'm not going to go along with that." Blah 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 blah. And the person basically gave a signal because he was holding like this balloon like thing, and he lifted up and like it drifted off. And then another one of our players got attacked by assassins before he did because they weren't following him. um, they were, it was a situation where if he had gone by himself, they would have been attacking the place where y'all are sleeping.
I feel so much worse about that because I chose to sleep outside that night.
Oh yeah, you would have potentially been in a problem there.
Yeah.
Well, except actually, you would have been outside. You would have been fine because they were attacking Alessa. So,
Ah, there we go.
um,
But it kind of brings up an interesting idea or point in that should downtime include any combat? Does combat suddenly make it where it's really not downtime?
mm, I don't. I would again. I would be very reluctant to set a rule of thumb there, saying that it shouldn't. I would say in general, I would avoid doing it on purpose, just because what happens if the person dies and no one
Mm-hmm.
else has an opportunity to have intervened at all. But there are circumstances like you mentioned in your game where one of our players went off on his own. There would have been no opportunity for anyone to intervene because no one knew he was gone. So
Yeah.
he was 100% on his own. So there was no way we could have interceded at all without metagaming the hell out of it. Uh, so in that case,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine, and it's a result of his actions. It's because you can't ever say no. Downtime would have combat because someone could do something really stupid and
Yeah.
cause
I,
combat no matter what.
I have one of you, or sometimes some of you have wanted to do some combat related things during downtime, and I've looked at it and be like, you're level 5 class, whatever. You get into trouble, you're probably capable of handling yourself with a normal small group of regular townsfolk. And
It's true.
you fast forward through it, like, yeah, you take some points of damage, you heal up. We don't even need to talk about it because you heal up magic. Um, just kind of fast forward through the instance and be done with
Yeah,
it.
it's like if you're fighting one town guard. I mean, come on, it's a town
Yeah.
guard. You smack him and he falls over. You're blowing him a little hard and he just
Yeah.
topples.
You ask a few questions. Do you kill him? Do you let him go? What's the general result of it? Okay, let's go to your other stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's fine for something that's not that, not that player story critical or something. That's just some kind of combat that's happening, or somebody wants to go rough up some people and ask them questions. Well, sure. I mean, you're a level 5 adventurer. Of
Yeah.
course, you can go
Oh,
rough
you rough
somebody
them
up.
up.
That's not
You rough
hard.
them real good. Yeah.
You're real good at that. So, um, one last question I wanted to ask you because we've kind of already gone over what was my last question. Um, but I have another one, and that is: are there ways you'd like to see downtime used better? Like things that you don't see as much for downtime that you would like to see more of? Um,
Yes, but more on a my end thing. Maybe as like a supplement to something I
mhm.
feel that while we play, I'm not doing quite as good at, or something like that. Where I wish I could remember to do those more often while we play. And that is supplemental story, where some of those smaller details that you might have on a piece of paper that as you're explaining things you just forget to mention, maybe come around through downtime things, and start letting those downtime moments influence how other major story things can kind of start to sneak in narratively.
Yeah, that actually just gave me a thought. That was I was very much not thinking about. I'm gonna instead write that down
That'll be the last
for a
question.
moment. That'll be the last question. Uh, because I was about to go into it, and I'm like, no, that's actually good to talk about on its own. Um, yeah, I have a couple of things. Like, I really like to see people working on long-term projects and goals for their character. During downtime, people identifying things like this is what my character wants to do in the long run or might want to do, and that's the thing. Like, you don't have to commit to something. To necessarily do some stuff to kind of prepare for it or ease into it or explore it a little bit. For instance, during your downtime, I was talking about my character has this little bit of a conflict where he's from a different country, and he there's a part of him that wants to or that is interested in becoming invested in the empire he's in now and establishing himself there in some capacity. He wants to be someone notable to a degree. He wants to be respected. But it's not, at least at present, it's not his home. He's only been there for like 3 months. So he's
Hmm.
kind of doing some things to explore that. Like, let me learn more about it. Let me kind of figure out how to blend in more to some degree. Because I don't know 100% that I want to do that. But if I do, dipping my toes in, I'm seeing
Yeah,
how it's going to work.
planting some
Um,
seeds.
yeah, yeah. And it helps him flirt better anyway. So, but um, seeing people either actually actively pursue long-term like personal goals or flirt with them, just experiment and explore them a little bit. And something that you don't see very much that I would like to see is group activities. Because this
Yeah.
is normally the domain of the live game, but there are some occasions where I could see people. For instance, this is something that happened very off screen downtime activity in Critical Role Campaign 1. They started a bakery. That's a group activity. The
Yes, they
group of
did.
them came together out of character and said, "We're going to
I
start a
forgot about that.
bakery." And I was like, "That's awesome. That's fantastic. I love that." There are occasions where it's like, do you really want to invest playtime live doing that? You could. It could even be interesting. I don't know. It could make for a fun session if that's what the players want to do. But having things that they could do together, like even just saying like, "Hey, we're going to have a party during downtime. We don't need to necessarily role play that, but we're going to have a party and we're going to invite these people and we're going to pay for food, and that's going to be a thing we do just to bond and hang out and stuff. We're going to have a party and we're going to do that for like a day or something."
Yeah.
Um,
When you do things like that, whether it's maybe half of the group or the full group kind of involved in this descriptionary thing that took place,
mhm.
it's good for the players to reflect upon that thing happened. What's the likelihood that I walk out of that thinking about one of the other players differently, and now going into the next session start acting that way?
And you would need, I think, to provide, and this is the hard part in something like that. I would think you need to have an avenue for people to talk about it, like
Hmm.
using Discord or something, and having people actually post on there and have a conversation about, okay, well, what does that party look like? What happens? What do I do during it? Okay, blah, blah, blah says they get absolute shit faced drunk. Okay, we need to know that. That's good to know. Other person, walks around hitting on everyone we invited to the party. Whatever the case may be. Um, People kind of going back and forth, and that is a problem that we have sometimes, where some people are really good at going and posting in downtime, like in
Yeah,
Discord and talking about stuff. Like, I always have Discord up. It's up 24/7. It's sitting there on
just
my other
about.
monitor. Uh, I will reply to things regularly, but some people don't have it up nearly as much or don't reply as quickly for downtime stuff, and so that could be a problem to do something like that and get input from somebody. So that could be a challenge for it, uh, and it's probably not something that is going to happen constantly
Right.
because not going to have that much
No.
need to not do something like that live.
Yeah. A DM can kind of regulate that by just coming up with a quick questionnaire of, hey, this party or whatever the situation is happening. Here are three to five questions about what your character might be doing there, and
Mm-hmm.
then have them just fill it out really quick, and
Yeah.
then maybe share it as a group, and so everyone kind of knows.
Yeah. So the last topic I had, which just you gave me as an idea,
Aha, yes.
things that the storyteller or the dungeon master can do for downtime. Because you were talking, kind of eased into that a little bit, and then I was like, wait, that actually gives me an idea. Like, whenever we have downtime, I ask the players what they want to do for downtime, but very rarely
Yeah.
do I ever sit down and go, okay, so what's going to happen in the world or around them during this downtime that I need to then tell them about?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not necessarily major like events or anything, but saying like, okay, um, it doesn't even have to. It could be lore related. It could be things that are related to the plot or push it forward a little bit or something. But it could also just be things like, hey, somebody broke out your window in your tavern, while in your guild hall. Someone broke out the window while you were there, and they're like, who did it? You don't know. Just a
Yeah.
rock got thrown through your window. Lol.
Suddenly there's an investigation downtime for someone or everyone.
Yeah, I'm real mad about that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something they follow up, just things to make the world more lively or to push
Yeah.
some plot forward or whatever the case may be. Just like what sort of things could the DM do during downtime?
Yeah, you definitely want to be careful and not have it be a potential hook for something that might start eating up more time than you had anticipated going into the
Yeah.
next session. But news, world news, local news, um, things like that, social interactions between NPCs you might have overheard, just to kind of drop some tidbits of things for future use, things like that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I got really excited about when I first saw it be used, and then I was like, oh, I'm immediately incorporating that in my game, and I'm glad I did for my Eberron game, is a newspaper.
Yes.
Which is kind of like that. It's kind of like a semi downtime thing where I'm just throwing information at the players and saying like, this is a thing, this is a thing, and it's a way to one make the world a little bit more lively, but also inform people about tidbits like the House of Nyx, where you can go and buy all kinds of magical performance gear and stuff, or get a super fancy painting made or whatever the case may be. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't put those out all the time, and no one's asked me about it yet. But I generally am like, if anyone asks me when I don't have one out, like, can I find one? I'm be like, yeah, there's just nothing of particular interest. There's current events. I'm
I
not
think I've
making one
asked
for
a few
every day.
times, but there's always been something to give. So,
Yeah, it's like I'm not making one for every particular day. There's no way. I just make them when I'm like, there's some particular interesting stuff I want to put in there or something.
yeah,
And
and that
it,
goes a long way to just world building and sharing that you might be in town X, but there are towns Z, A, B, D, whatever out there, and you're getting some news from some of them, and it's just not your perspective. There's a bigger world out there.
yeah, and it's a really good way to throw out potential plot hooks. Um, but them actually not be things that they have to follow up on, because generally, because it's a newspaper, they may not even be in that area. So then they're like, well, I could follow up on this, but it's way over there. Do I really want to? Or maybe it comes back up again later and is relevant. Like y'all have been traveling to the west this entire game.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the east, there's been like a whole war brewing and going on, and kind of getting worse the entire time. And so y'all are
We
kind of
just said
like,
bye.
that's a thing. We're 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 gonna go this way, but it's still happening, so you're still getting kind of updates on it a little
Yeah.
bit every now and then of like stuff's happening. But then also there's just I use it to advertise shops like magic shops and things in some of the bigger cities and random events that happen. or celebrations that are coming up. So then y'all could be like, oh, hey, we want to go to that city for that party thing. That sounds cool. Um, and so that's an example. And I think there's more stuff on like a micro level that a DM could do um, during downtime. I'm struggling to come up with examples on the spot uh, that aren't a little
Yeah.
bit
I
silly.
mean, if they're
But
micro enough, maybe they're intended to be subtle. So if you don't pick up on it, maybe that means that it worked.
yeah, well, it could be stuff like just saying, "Hey, we're having 3 days of downtime," and then at some point messaging one of the players and being like, "Your guild master, blah blah blah, buys you takes you out for wants to take you out for beers and buys you a drink." Um, okay, what did he want? Nothing. He just wanted to sit with you and have a drink, man. That's it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just something nice. Like, okay, you've got a bit of a rapport, you're hanging out or whatever. It's a thing that happened. And you don't have to do that for everybody, or everything,
Yeah.
but it's like just kind of established, like, hey, you might actually hang out with these people on occasion instead of them just being there when you summon
Year
them by
round.
your player
Yeah.
power.
No, that's true. I think downtime works should work for both the DM and the player. They should both be actively trying to do something. It's usually not the case, but
Yeah.
it would probably improve a downtime experience.
Yeah, I admit, like I'd actually never thought of it in that line. Like it's downtime's for the players. That's generally how I've always perceived it. It's for the players to do things. I've never had the thought like, oh, I should maybe be doing things as well for them. I use it as prep time. Let me go prep more things.
Yeah.
But
It's usually very reactionary to me. Like we ask the question, what do you want to do? And you get from 4 or 5 different players a list, long, short,
mhm.
however much is there. And you're now just reacting to the things they want to do. And you're not focusing on giving them things unless it's relevant to the things they asked.
Yeah, which is kind of part of the downtime purpose in a way. Like you don't want to give them too much because then it's not downtime. And
Yeah.
then you've suddenly thrown them into a mystery to solve who smashed the window.
Yeah.
Um,
That'll be
but
next session.
you can, but I think there is some stuff that you could do as a DM to kind of, or at least maybe ask the question, like, is there anything I want to do, like anything I want to throw to them uh, during this time besides what do you want to do?
Yeah. I find sometimes I do add some things, like depending on where you're going or what you're doing. For instance, your character talking about etiquette, and it made sense. Like if you're looking for etiquette and how this empire does things, you're probably going to get some history with it, and that means there's some information that might be very interesting to you in particular
Mm-hmm.
that I'll pass along with that you didn't know previously, and start handing out a little bit of lore with it.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that players can do during downtime, besides work on their personal goals, is research. Having their characters either looking for something or asking people socially about something or going to the library and researching things or whatever the case may be, but like actively trying to learn more, using downtime to learn more about the world, about the city, about their surroundings and stuff. Because um, chances are the storyteller has probably built some of it. It doesn't necessarily have to reinvent it. It's just sitting there with no vehicle or way to come out.
Yeah.
Uh, and so when somebody asks me about something I've actually planned out, I'm like, oh, yes, awesome. That's fantastic. Let me go just copy and paste. There you go.
I get into this area with it where I really focus on like continuity of downtime, because sometimes multiple players go to the same place at different times intentionally, like not trying to work together. And it's like, oh, well, you'll be there, and oh, well, you were there like 3 hours earlier or the day before. Let's make a reference to that. You were there. It's like, oh, in character, we have a social talk, and it's like, oh, well, so and so was here yesterday, haha. And so now that they were also kind of doing something, and
Yeah.
it kind of loops you guys back in a little bit enough to start maybe thinking about it.
Why is this guy now grumbling about floating people? Why is he so pissed off about that? I don't know. Why is he so bitter? Uh, anyway, so do you have anything else about downtime? Because I've burned out on
Uh,
stuff.
um, no, I mean, be reasonable as a DM with how much time you're giving and how much can be done in that time.
Hmm.
Set limitations, but also be completely open with allowing a decent amount of things to get done. Because if you're devoting, like a wizard especially, lots of devotion to the things wizards do, um, you don't have to be like specific, like you have to spend 6 hours on a spell and this and that. But gauge roughly, like you have, it's going to take this amount of time for you to do stuff. So work it out with them and be as allowing as it makes sense to be.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're, I would add to that and just say when you're as a storyteller, when you're deciding what to allow during downtime and or how to go about it, whether you're going to do play by post or summarize activities or set up a one-on-one session, don't be afraid to say no. Don't know what your availability and limits are, and be like, if you can't go do a one-on-one session with somebody because you've got 4, 5, 6 players, that can be hard if more than one person's asking for something, or your times just don't mesh up. Be willing to say, no, I can't do that. We're just gonna have to kind of sum this up. We're gonna have to do it through an email and just kind of wrap up and just tell me what you want to do, and I'll ask you for roles, or maybe ask exactly what you want to say, or whatever the case may be, and we'll figure it out. Because ultimately, you've got usually a set time to play, and there's a reason a lot of stuff goes into those play sessions, including shopping and stuff, because
Yeah.
you can't fit everything into downtime.
And on an in-character level, don't be afraid to say no to a character if they're trying to do something, or to say, that's really cool, that sounds like a thing, it's probably going to take time, feel free to start it, and through the course of playtime and
Yeah.
maybe more downtime, allow it to kind of organically manifest rather than trying to squeeze it all in a meta unsensible way. And
Yeah.
so
All right. Well, I think that's it for us tonight. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We will catch you later on other things. We will again have Mask and Mimicry in 2 weeks, of course, every other Wednesday night. I am currently streaming Cyberpunk every
yeah.
Friday and Sunday, so I'll be on for that. At some point in the near future, towards the end of January, I'm going to start being on Tabletop to Keyboard doing
Oh yeah.
Zweihander on their channel. So you can check that out in about a
That
month.
is Sundays.
Yeah, it'll be Sundays. So my Sunday stream will become like an every other week thing or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that's it. I hope you have a good night. And remember, if it's a somewhat drawn out 20 something post email RP that began with sorcerer's research and tracked off into discussion of your favorite teas, but is the only thing keeping you RPing and hanging on through the holidays, it's probably not a mimic. Good night.